Welcome back to GlassCast, the official podcast of Glass Magazine and the National Glass Association. I'm Katy Devlin, the content director of the National Glass Association, and I'm joined by my colleague Sara Neiswanger and Jonathan Hafemann, the Vice President of Commercialization and Growth from Next Energy. Today we are chatting with you from GlassBuild America 2024 in Dallas. We are in a podcast studio specially built for the show with a glass enclosure from Old Castle Building Envelope. And before we kick things off, I want to acknowledge our podcast studio sponsors, North American Specialty Laminators, Schott, and Becca. So let's start out. Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself for folks who might not have met you yet?
Thank you. So Jonathan Hafemann, Vice President of Commercialization and Growth at Next. My background is really, I'm on my fourth startup right now, so this is my fourth adventure into the unknown and second in the glass industry. Prior to that, worked at Halio for just under 3 years. That was my education into the structure of the glass market and some of the unique challenges around bringing new technologies into the space. And then prior to that, worked on a couple of other startups that were focused on bringing new technology, mostly around energy efficiency, into the built environment. So spent an inordinate amount of time in startups, well beyond my probably risk profile, and have learned a lot in that process.
So, Jonathan, just based on your background, you are kind of an expert in terms of the high performance, next gen high performance solutions that we have from the industry. Let's start out by having you give us a bit of a state of the industry in terms of our of high performance and our glazed materials.
Well, the way I like to think about it is like when I worked at Halio and I really began to assess the size of that market, or the size of the glass market in general for commercial facades, and then looking at backing into the total volumes of the three players, my observation was that all three of the smart glass, or call them smart glass 1.0 companies, had less than 0.5% of market share. And I think if you extend that out and you go, okay, smart glass, BIPV, VIG, aerogels, thin triples, any of the other, high performance glass technologies, you're still sub 1% overall with the total share of the market. So as far as state of the industry, we've got some work to do. Yeah. So there's clearly a big, I would say, opportunity in front of us. That means, hey, we've got a lot of room to grow. But right now we're in the heart of some of the biggest challenges in bringing these technologies into the market in a broader way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you were on stage yesterday at the main stage, GlassBuild, with a number of other folks talking about high performance technologies. Sara, you were there yesterday, kind of running the show. Why don't you set?
Yeah, no, it was a terrific panel that covered a variety of different, up and coming or growing high performance products. In your talk specifically, you mentioned kind of the valley of death, I guess, of a new startup. Could you elaborate a bit on that? And what goes in? Why is some of these products hard to adopt in the beginning?
Sure. So there's basically three valleys of death within a startup's life cycle. And what those are, just really the way to think about it is those are periods of time where the risk of that company going under is very high, the probability of it going under. And it seems to be these stages of growth where companies, startups in particular, can fail. So the first one is the technology valley of death. So that's basically taking your idea that you've had, maybe you've validated it on a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of glass in a lab. But now you've got to figure out, can I develop some processes around this to get it on increasingly bigger sizes of glass? And can I create a path to seeing this scale and get it out of the lab and into maybe more of a pilot stage? So that's the first valley of death. The second valley of death is the commercialization stage. And I think this is the most acute valley of death for the glass industry in particular. And so that's basically going from, I have a pilot line or a prototype line and the ability to do small scale demonstrations to something that can scale broadly into the market. And this is where there are some acutely unique challenges within the glass industry. Before I go into those, I'll just say the third stage is profitability. So that's basically where you've commercialized, you're growing revenue, and now there's this race to figure out if you can become profitable enough, fast enough to outrun your burn rate, basically. Your burn rate meaning the amount of cash that you're spending every month to support your staff and operations. So those are the three big valleys of death. I think the one for glass that is most acutely challenging is commercialization, and there's a few reasons why. One is that when you go to, there's this tension in glass where we want everything to be de-risked, right? We want something to have long-term performance data. We want to have a lot of validation of performance before it ever goes on a building. And so there's a unique challenge there around basically once you finish your pilot line in the world of a startup, you just want to start selling and going. In the world of glass, everybody's like, oh, hold on. We need some more information from you. And so then there's this like, hey, we need field testing data. There's this there's all this additional time that gets dragged into the product development process for a startup that is extremely challenging. Then there's the issue of once you get from the pilot line being ready to something that you need to stand up, then you've got a pretty significant equipment CapEx that you need to deploy. So you need to raise 30, 40, 50, 100, 150, $200 million maybe. In the case of certain technologies, if your technology is like a vapor deposition based coating, you're talking $150 million minimum, which I think that took another glass technology company out of the market this year. And certainly that's the kind of stack that View had to build around. So it shows you sort of the capital intensity of getting a line going at commercial scale for glass products. And then if you're going after the commercial side of the market, you've got this really long ramp up to revenue. So you've got really long design cycles, and your sales cycles alone, independent of the other challenges, are problematic for a startup as well. So those three things to me make commercializing a new technology in the glass market extremely challenging.
It's like, this does sound pretty daunting. So what would you, there's a lot of obstacles, obviously, you've outlined, especially for glass companies. Is there something that you've seen that can get them over the hump, like get them past that final valley? What in your mind would be that success marker?
So some of it has to do with, I would say, like, if you've married yourself to a technology that's going to require capital intensity, or you're going to have to stand up your own factory, you're probably not going to make it, in my mind. So there's some of it is like, okay, you can adjust your strategy, and others of it is like, no, your approach is baked in based on the underlying technology. And so you have to know that ahead of time and understand that certain technologies are not going to get over the line because of the capital intensity required to stand up that commercialize that product. But from a strategy perspective, what I've seen is really helpful is you got to find low risk entry points to get some sales going for your solution. So what I see is this was like a eureka moment for me when I was having a conversation with one of these executives at AGC Europe about one of the technologies I was working on, and he said, yeah, it's interesting that you guys are going after commercial facades. Usually coatings go to automotive first and then come over to buildings. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I been missing? and what the insight there was, if you have an issue with your coating on an automotive piece of glass, you just grab a piece of equipment, pull it out, grab something else, pull it back in, and you're on your way, right? Talking about a low risk, low cost repair relative to the high risk, high cost repair process on a building, that, you got to have these like sort of de-risked entry points into the market. So looking at things that have standard sizes, that have repeatability and low risk or low cost serviceability of the installation is really key. So for our market, that would be things like either automotive or skylights or things with standard sizes that are repeatable, that aren't going to threaten the overall viability, financial viability of the company if or when something goes wrong. So finding those low risk entry points is a really significant key to both generating revenue. The other aspect of it is you want to have some other forms of revenue when you start selling into the commercial facade market, because you can't have all this pressure. We experienced this at Halio where the board, everybody was saying, what's the number? What's the number? What's the number? What are you guys going to do? How much money you're going to generate this year? And there's an element of that market that you just can't control from a timing perspective. Projects go on hold, projects get delayed, projects get held up for a variety of reasons. And your sales team really could just be sitting there going, I'm doing everything I can, but I don't have the ability to control this external factor that's put my project on hold and delayed my revenue. So having other markets where you have revenue streams that are consistent and reliable, that buoy your process going into the commercial sales cycle is critical.
That's excellent.
So we just have a couple of minutes, but I would like to hear your thoughts on where we're headed. If we're able to kind of get over this hump or begin to navigate some of these pretty big challenges with how the industry functions, where can we be in 5 to 10 years?
Well, I like to think of this. I'm marketing this concept of facade 2.0. And the idea is that we're headed towards a future where the combination of technologies that affect solar heat gain and affect U values are going to eventually outperform a wall. So we will, in the near future, in the next 5 to 10 years, have the ability to produce transparency that outperforms a wall. And that's huge, from both a design standpoint, I would say a building performance standpoint. And what that's going to do is that's going to really raise the bar for buildings and probably be one of the key elements that pushes us past the tipping point of always having buildings being a net negative to at least being net zero and potentially being net positive, in combination with all the other kind of decentralized power generation capabilities that are coming online in the next 5 to 10 years as well. So I think it's very exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There are no shortage of challenges to deal with or address along the way, but the potential is enormous and potentially represents a shift where glass is no longer the weak point in the facade system. It's going to shift to the frame. And suddenly we're going to be getting our podcast sponsors here, Oldcastle and others, going, what are you doing about your metal? How are you making your frames more efficient? Because now you're the weak point, right? And so I think that's exciting. And it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for chatting with us today. It's always good to see you and hear your thoughts on where we're headed. Again, I'm Katy Devlin, Content Director for the NGA. Sara Neiswanger, Associate Director of Industry Engagements. And this is GlassCast. We'll close out with a final thank you again to our sponsors, Oldcastle Building Envelope, which enclosed this beautiful space, and North American Specialty Laminators, Schott, and Becca. Thanks so much.